I have myself muted. Damn. Ahoy there, my children of the Force. Welcome to Star Wars Transmission's weekly Q&A. I'm your boy, Dan. We've got some really fun and awesome questions to dive into today. And I had a lot of fun working on these questions and putting them together for you. So let's get right into it. So our first question comes from Princess Leia Organa, who asks, do you think Vice Admiral Rampart and the Empire killed Commander Cody? This is a good question. I saw a lot of people ask this in comments to my recent video about Crosshair possibly rejoining the Bad Batch. I saw some folks ask this during mine and Danny's live stream last week, and then I've seen this just on social media and Reddit, things like that. People saying, hey, did Vice Admiral Rampart murk our boy Cody? So here's my thing. I don't think Rampart and the Empire killed Commander Cody. Cody is a fan favorite character, right? And if he's going to get murked, I feel like he should have an on-screen death, right? That would only feel appropriate for our boy, right? As I mentioned, he's a fan favorite. I like Commander Cody. It would really stink to see that he's died off screen. I think it'd be booty cheeks if we learned that Rampart did in fact kill Cody off screen. So, I mean, think about how intense it was when Rampart killed Wilco at the end of episode 2. That was very intense. And now imagine if we do see Cody get killed, how friggin' intense that would be. So having an off-screen death for Cody would be a bummer for me, and I think a lot of fans would feel the same way if Cody was killed off screen and didn't get to see that. I think whether Cody dies, whether it's off screen or not, is still going to stink. But if he's going to die, I would hope that we get to see an on-screen death for Cody. So to me, it feels very unlikely that Rampart and the Empire executed Commander Cody, right? For that reason alone, I just think that Cody is too much of an important character for him to be executed off screen. So the other thing to think of is what would propel Rampart and the Empire from killing Cody? What would be their reason for killing Cody? What would be the impetus towards killing Cody off screen, right? After Cody and Crosshair's mission to Desix, while we as fans know that Cody is struggling with what he's just done on Desix, what he's been doing as an Imperial soldier, that's not known to Rampart and the Empire, right? They think that Cody, at that point, leading up to the mission to Desix, they think that Cody supports the Empire. They believe that Cody is committed to the Empire, which is why Cody was given command of the mission to Desix. So Rampart and Cody's superiors probably have no clue that Cody is getting to a point where he's realizing, hey, I don't want to be a part of the Empire. I don't want to take part in these war crimes and these atrocious things that they're doing to galactic citizens. And hearing other clones are going AWOL, I think that's what led Cody to go AWOL. So all Rampart and the Empire know at this point in time is that Cody and Crosshair, they've returned from Desix. They've just had a very successful mission, and they've eliminated the threat of Governor Ames and her separatist squad of battle droids, right? So they think that Cody and Crosshair's mission was a success. So when you think about that, what would propel Rampart and the Empire from wanting to execute Cody? There doesn't really seem to be a valid reason in my mind as to why Rampart would want to kill Cody after, again, he's just had a quite successful mission. I do think that Cody going AWOL is going to also be something that is going to be a driving force in the story moving forward. So I don't think that we've seen the last of Cody yet. I don't know how Cody is going to play into the remainder of season 2 with the Bad Batch, but I think there's a couple of different scenarios or a couple ways that Cody could still play into season 2 of the Bad Batch, because I don't think it's the last we've seen of him. I do think that we're going to see him again, especially because his interactions with Crosshair in the last episode in the solitary clone was really, really great. And I think there's a lot of potential that Cody can bring to the story of the Bad Batch and where we may see the story go in season 2. The other thing too is that, and I talked about this, Danielle and I talked about this in our live stream on Wednesday, breaking down episode 3, is in Legends, the clones had a clone revolt against the Empire. And that was something that a lot of people speculated we may see in season 1. For a little bit there, I thought that we might see a clone revolt in season 1 as well. Now, based on what we've learned in episode 3, Cody's gone AWOL. A bunch of other clones have gone AWOL. So I'm wondering if we may potentially see the beginnings of what might become a clone revolt that we may see. And this is just, speculation on my part. Other people have speculated it. But I think that would be cool if we got to see a potential clone revolt, and we see Commander Cody is a big part of getting the clones together and having them fight against the Empire, and Cody leading that revolt, maybe even with Rex, although that seems unlikely that Rex would be a part of that, because we know that even if there's going to be a clone revolt, it's not going to go well for the clones that are involved. So I could see a scenario where Cody could lead that revolt. I don't think Rex would be a part of it. I also wonder if, we do see that Cody has, survived after episode 3. Is he going to seek out Rex? Is he going to try to find Rex? It's going to be interesting to see, because at this point, Cody has no clue what's happened to Rex. I shouldn't say he has no clue what's happened to Rex, because after the season 7 finale of the Clone Wars, Rex and Ahsoka are both presumed dead. So Cody at this point is probably thinking that Rex is dead, but if he connects with the Bad Batch may tell him, hey, Rex is around, he's still alive, and the Bad Batch may connect Cody to Rex and help Cody get to Rex so that Cody could help lead a fight against the Empire. So I wonder if where we're going to see Cody wind up next could be maybe working with the Bad Batch, them connecting him with Rex and kind of going from there. I feel like it would be a missed opportunity if Dave Filoni, everyone involved with the Bad Batch, if they killed Commander Cody off screen. Like, that just seems very much like a missed opportunity, because again, even if the thought is, hey, we're going to have Rampart execute Cody, I think that would still be a very intense and dramatic moment that, as much as it would sting, as much as it would be a gut punch, fans would want to see. Because again, think back to episode 2 when Wilco was executed by Cody. That was pretty intense, man. That was a very intense scene. And I think for a lot of fans, if you took Wilco out of that scene and you put Commander Cody into it, that would be even more of an intense scene. So now, if Cody's going to be executed, I think it's going to wind up being on screen. I think what's more likely, at least in my opinion, is that Cody is going to have a role in fighting the Empire. I just don't know what that role is going to be. I don't know who's going to be he'll be doing that with, or how that's going to look. but I think we're going to see Cody fighting against the Empire, and I think that's how we may see him die. I don't think Cody is long for this world, sadly, but I could be wrong, right? I think he's probably going to die at some point in season 2, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I'm glad that we got to see Cody in episode 2. I'm hoping he was not killed at the end of the episode, because that would stink, especially if it was off screen. But we're going to have to wait and see how things shake out and how the rest of season 2 winds up playing out for the Bad Batch. All right, before we move on to our next questions, so we got Terry. Welcome to the chat. Glad you're joining us. Terry says, Cody is my favorite clone. Please, I think saying protect, or not sure what you're saying. Maybe protect Cody, but yeah, protect Cody at all costs. Danielle had mentioned this to me during the live stream on Wednesday when we were talking about episode 3, Commander Cody, and the emotions and the thoughts that he might have after his mission to Desix. And I hadn't even thought about Cody thinking about Obi-Wan. You have to wonder, is Cody second guessing his involvement in Order 66 and what he did to Obi-Wan and what he potentially did to other Jedi and what he's done across the galaxy to bring the galaxy under Imperial yoke, the Imperial yoke. So it makes me wonder, did part of the reason why Cody decided to go AWOL have to do with what he did to Obi-Wan? I think even in the barest of reasons, or the minimalist of reasons, I think at least to some degree, what he did to Obi-Wan and his involvement in Order 66 and what he did after the initiation of Order 66, I do think that Cody is second guessing his decision and is feeling guilty, which in part made him go AWOL. Ray Reyes, thank you, or welcome to the chat, I should say. Do you think Rex and the Bad Batch will rescue Cody for the Empire? I don't know. I think we're going to see Cody and Rex meet up again. I hope we do. I think a lot of fans would like to see that. I would like to see that. I think that would be really cool to see Cody and Rex meet up again. And especially if they could have a conversation kind of similar to what Cody had with Crosshair at the end of episode 3, lamenting their involvement with Order 66 and well, maybe not Rex, but Cody lamenting his involvement in Order 66 and what he did after Darth Sidious initiated Order 66. So it'd be cool to have that, to see that conversation play out between Cody and Rex. So again, that's part of the reason why I don't think Cody was killed off screen, because I feel like there's so much opportunity to be had story-wise with keeping Cody alive, as opposed to just murking him off screen and just saying, hey, Cody's done, we're moving on, right? It just seems to me like it would be a wasted opportunity. But I do think at some point we're going to see Cody and Rex meet up again. I do think so. The Bad Jedi, welcome to the chat, my friend. Keep a lookout, because there's a very good chance your question might be one of the questions I answer today. All right, let's move on to our next question. So sticking with my homegirl, Princess Leia Organa, she also asks, what was the bill the two clones were discussing while sitting next to Crosshair? I was very happy that Princess Leia Organa asked this question, because these are my kinds of questions, these little tidbits of lore. So what Princess Leia is referring to is what's called the Defense Recruitment Bill. And early on in the episode 3, The Solitary Clone, we see Crosshair. He's getting his day started. He goes to get a meal at the mess hall. He goes to sit down, and as he's sitting down, we see these two clones right here. These two guys who are mean mugging Crosshair. Right before Crosshair sits down, we hear one clone say that the Defense Recruitment Bill is up for a vote again, and the other clone basically is lamenting that he hopes the bill does not pass. So what exactly is this bill? Why were the clones talking about it? And what does it mean for the story of season 2 of the Bad Batch? So here's what we know about that bill so far. There's not a ton of information that we know about the bill, but we could at least make some guesses as far as what this bill could entail and what sort of ramifications it could have for the Star Wars galaxy during this time period, which is 19 BBY. We're still in 19 BBY in season 2 of the Bad Batch. So here's what we know about the defense recruitment bill. It was a bill related to the soldiers who would serve the expanded Galactic Empire, with a focus on recruiting troops instead of relying on clone troopers that were once used by the Galactic Republic. So basically it's a continuation of what we saw in season 1. The Empire wants to move away from using clone troopers and wants to get into a military that has recruits operate within its ranks rather than utilizing clones. And remember, at the end of season 1, we saw Tipoca City and the cloning facility on Kamino, and on Tipoca City, I should say, get obliterated, right? So now this bill would be another continuation of the Empire moving in the direction of completely getting rid of clones to fill out their ranks within the military. So during season 2, we are still seeing that the Empire is utilizing clone troopers. So they still have clone troopers in their ranks, right? We saw that in episode 3, but we also saw last season Rampart and Tarkin began Project Warmantle. And that was an initiative of the Galactic Empire enacted soon after, not too long after Order 66. And again, the idea was, let's start to fill out our military with recruits rather than clones, and they, as well as conscripted soldiers as well, start to use recruits, conscripted soldiers, and get away from using clone troopers. And primarily it was going to be recruited and conscripted human soldiers, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth momentarily. But Project Warmantle, actually, let me go back for a second. Let's stick with Tarkin and Rampart. Project Warmantle led to the first TK troopers, which was the stormtrooper designation that we saw used all the way into the original trilogy. So Project Warmantle saw the first TK troopers use that designation all the way up to the which that designation was used all the way up to the dissolution of the Empire in 5 ABY with the Galactic Concordance. The Galactic Concordance was the peace treaty signed by essentially the New Republic, or what would become the New Republic, and Masamida. And that dissolved the Empire. So 19 BBY, we see the creation of Project Warmantle. The TK designation is basically created. That designation is going to be used up until 5 ABY. So not long after the creation of Project Warmantle, the Empire realized that the threat of the Kaminoans and their ability to create clones, the threat that their clone troopers could have on the Empire and to Sidious's power. So that's why we saw the Empire terminate all of the Kaminoans' contracts and then destroy Tipoca City in season 1, at the end of season 1 of the Bad Batch. Another issue with the use of clones that the Empire understood was, in using clone troopers, they only had a limited amount of time that they could be in service because of their accelerated aging. Remember, because of the clones being created, what was it? Was it 10 years before Attack of the Clones? I can't remember the exact date when Count Dooku, or Sifo Dyas, excuse me, commissioned the Kaminoans to create the clones, but we'll say for right now 10 years prior to Attack of the Clones, right? So in a decade's time, the Kaminoans would need to have clones of age and ready to fight at the drop of a hat, right? So they've got accelerated aging. That's why you see in the Clone Wars in episode 1, the very first episode, the pilot episode, Yoda is talking to the clone troopers, and in the anthology Clone Wars book, basically saying like how I perceive them in the Force, or how I feel them in the Force, is like that of children, because essentially they're children in these adult bodies, basically because of the accelerated aging that was embedded into their genetic makeup when they were being created. So without the Kaminoans pumping out clones, the Empire would not have that steady stream of troopers to fill out their military ranks. And so they had to come up with other ways to bolster their military numbers so that they would be able to continue to keep their power and their grip on the galaxy. So this is where the Defense Recruitment Bill comes into play. Once authorized, this bill would provide the Empire with the legal capability of recruiting individuals across the galaxy for their military. Obviously, we know this bill is eventually going to pass because clones are going to be soon completely phased out from the military, and the Empire is going to go to a complete recruitment and conscription-based military. So we know at some point this bill, or something of it, is going, or similar to it, I should say, is going to eventually pass. And as I mentioned before, recruitment for the Imperial military was strictly only for humans. And this was due to the fact that the Empire favored humans over aliens, because the Empire was xenophobic. They did not like having aliens amongst their ranks. That's why Thrawn is such a badass, because essentially he would have to be a badass to be able to operate, or excuse me, to be able to be within the Imperial military, because aliens were not allowed in the military. So this bill would be of interest to the two clones that we see speaking early in the solitary clone, because if this bill passes, those two clones may be out of a job, or those two clones could be phased out completely from the military. And then what do they do, right? All they've known is being clone troopers and fighting and being a part of initially the the Republic military, but now the Imperial military. So this could be the end of that, the end for them as far as their service in the Imperial military. So if that bill passes, our two homeboys could be without work. They could be like that clone trooper that we saw in Obi-Wan. Oh, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the planet right now. I can't remember that clone's what planet we saw Obi-Wan go to, but it's in episode 2 where we see that homeless clone trooper panhandling, right? That could be the fate of the two clone troopers talking about that bill. And now going back to what I mentioned earlier about a potential clone revolt, even if we don't see every single clone trooper decide to go AWOL, the passing of the defense military bill, or recruitment bill, excuse me, could be an impetus towards a lot of clones going AWOL, a lot of clones walking away from their post, which could potentially lead to something like a clone revolt, potentially in season 2. So I love this little nugget. I love that it's a very quick little thing that you hear these two clones. They're just quickly speaking as we see Crosshair getting ready to sit down and eat his breakfast, right? But that one sentence, two sentence conversation between those clone troopers could have massive ramifications for them, could have massive ramifications for the story of season 2 of The Bad Batch, massive ramifications for the galaxy at large. So that 2-sentence conversation, 3-sentence conversation between those clones, it's a big deal. It's a very big deal. At the bare minimum, I like that it's giving us some information about the Empire, how they were operating during the early days and months following the topple of the Republic and the Jedi, because remember, season 2 of The Bad Batch is only taking place about 2 months after the events of Order 66. So we're in the very, very, very early days of the Galactic Empire. So this story is still taking place in 19 BBY. So I like that we're getting these little nuggets, these little tidbits of information about the Empire, how they were operating, and what they were doing to really grab hold of the galaxy for Sidious and not relinquish that hold and basically allow Sidious to be a tyrant for 2 decades plus. As I mentioned, we know at some point the clones are going to get phased out. We know that the Empire is going to be utilizing just strictly TK troopers, and it's just going to be recruits and conscripts. So we know at some point the clones are going to be phased out. What I found wild, I wasn't aware of this until I was reading it, the Empire, during its height, had billions of soldiers, which would become the largest military force the galaxy has ever seen. I was not aware of that. I would have thought that there would have been other forces that would have been larger than the Imperial military. But then the more I started thinking about it, I was like, that makes sense. We haven't seen someone take hold of the galaxy the way Sidious does and hold it for so long and be in power for so long and need a gigantic military force like the Empire needs to be able to maintain that power. So it would make sense that the Imperial military wound up becoming the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. That was a cool little tidbit that I found that I thought was really interesting. So basically, to sum everything up, the defense recruitment bill basically made it legal for the Empire to begin recruiting new enlistees into the military, which would officially signify the coming end of the clones being used in the Imperial military. So again, that's why we see those 2 clone troopers having that conversation. All right, before we move on to our next question, Rico, welcome to the chat. We all know how clones were created and when, but how were the Separatist droids created and when? Well, we saw the Separatists, they had foundries on Geonosis. I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything specifically off the top of my head that comes to mind. So, bro, when I do my Q&A request, drop that question in my Q&A so I could look that up more, because I'm drawing a blank. I can't think of anything specifically in canon. The only thing I can think of is the foundry on Geonosis, but there's got to be more, and I'm drawing a blank right now. So that would be a good question for me to take a deeper dive into and look into more. The Rakusa 120, wouldn't Cody hide in Coruscant or get to a ship to get to another planet? So going back to what we talked about earlier, Coruscant seems like it could be a good spot, although the Empire is going to have a pretty hefty presence on Coruscant. It wouldn't shock me if he tried to go somewhere in the Outer Rim, to basically some very backwater world in the Outer Rim. That makes sense. You could make the argument, though, that going to Coruscant, where there's trillions of people, I think there's trillions of people that live on Coruscant. Not a bad idea. Go into one of the lower levels, but then you're going right into the Hornet's Nest, right? So I think we may find out that Cody's dipped out to the Outer Rim. That seems to me like the best option for him. A lot of times when we see in Star Wars someone needs to go into hiding, someone needs to evade the Empire or whomever, they usually dip out to go to the Outer Rim. So that's my guess, is Cody's probably made his way to the Outer Rim. He's going to try to find other clones. He's going to try to connect with the Bad Batch, hopefully then connect with Rex. All right, let's move on to our next question. So this is a hefty Bad Batch question Q&A this week, which I'm loving. I love that you guys want to know about the Bad Batch. So I think this is Raz Elite asks, do you think Crosshair will rejoin the Bad Batch? I had to choose this question. I just released a short about this over the weekend, and I'm going to say, essentially spoil my my short. Absolutely. I do think that Crosshair is going to rejoin the Bad Batch. At least I should say, maybe I should say I hope Crosshair is going to rejoin the Bad Batch. I mentioned this again this past Wednesday during our mine and Danielle's breakdown of episode 3 of the Bad Batch, that I really like Crosshair. When the Bad Batch was first introduced in the Clone Wars in season 7 of the members of the Bad Batch, Crosshair was my favorite. I love that he was a sniper. I was playing Battlefront 3 a ton at that time, and I would typically rock sniper in Battlefront 3. So that was one reason why I really liked him. I like that he's a curmudgeon. He's just a sourpuss, and I kind of like that of him. I like that he's got the toothpick, and he's just, I don't know, I like Crosshair. He's a character that I really liked when we first were introduced to him, and I was bummed when we found out he was going to stick with the Empire and he was not going to join Clone Force 99, his Bad Batch brothers. So I've been rooting for a Crosshair redemption since last season. I've been hoping for a Crosshair redemption and for him to rejoin the Bad Batch since last season. But with that aside, with my feelings and emotions aside, I think that when we take into account how episode 3 ended this past week, and how we see Crosshair, how the episode leaves him, I think that he is still struggling with his decision to stick with the Empire, to part ways from the Bad Batch, from Clone Force 99. I think he's struggling with that decision, and I think it's weighing on him heavily, especially the fact that he abandoned his sister and his brothers of the Bad Batch to what? To be just another lackey in the Empire. You know, I mentioned this in our live stream, that one of the things that I picked up on in episode 3, and this could totally just be me pulling stuff out of thin air, but I thought that at least in part, one of the reasons why we see the episode open essentially with Crosshair kind of getting woken up by that terrible chime, going to the mess hall, speaking with Rampart, and then the episode ends the same way. After his mission to Desix, he is woken up by that chime, he goes to the mess hall, and then he speaks to Rampart, and we find out Cody has gone AWOL. Part of the reason why I think the episode begins that way and ends that way is to basically show this is just another day in the life of an Imperial soldier, operating in the Empire, getting missions to go across the galaxy to kill whomever or to do whatever atrocious acts that their superior is telling them to do. It's just another day for Crosshair and for people like him, or clones like him, I should say, and other troopers like him. And I think that the drudgery of doing that, the monotony of doing that, his decision of leaving his brothers and his sister behind, I think those are all starting to wear on him. I think both physically and mentally. We see him at multiple instances when we're seeing him back at the Imperial, what's it called again? Imperial something HQ. And I'm drawing a blank on what the middle word is, but basically the Imperial military's like headquarters on Coruscant. He's just kind of like going through the motions, man. He's struggling, right? He's really struggling at this point in time with his involvement in the Imperial military and his choice to stick with it. I also think, too, the other thing that we need to think about with Crosshair is we find out he was marooned on Kamino after the Empire destroyed Tapoka City. He was marooned on Kamino for about a month. I think Crosshair said it was 32 standard rotations or 32 rotations, something along those lines, right? So he was basically marooned on Kamino for a long time. He had nothing to do but think about his actions and think about what he's done since we initially meet up with the Bad Batch at the beginning of season 1. right? So he's got a lot of time to think about his actions. But the other thing too is he does not rat out Clone Force 99. He does not tell Rampart that Clone Force 99 survived the bombardment and destruction of Tipoca City. Now, part of that could just be for if he tells Rampart that, hey, Bad Batch survived, Rampart may assume or basically realize that, hey, the only way they survived is if my homeboy helped them out here, and that could mean that could be a death sentence for him. So Crosshair could understand that, hey, if I rat out Clone Force 99, that could spell trouble for me. But I think it's more likely that Crosshair did not rat them out because he wants them to survive. He doesn't want them to die or be arrested. So I think when you factor that in, I think we're starting to see that Crosshair is really struggling at this point, and I think at some point we're going to see him return to the Bad Batch, right? Because again, going back to my point about him not writing out the Bad Batch, we know that because at the end of episode 2, the whole reason why Rampart kills Wilco is because Wilco was saying in his report, hey, what's happened on Sereno, it's because I saw Clone Force 99, we engaged them, but they survived. And Rampart's telling him, hey, you're going to have to alter that report. I cannot let Tarkin know that I failed on Kamino. Wilco holds his ground and says, nope, not going to happen. And that's when freaking Rampart murks his ass. So we know Crosshair did not rat out the Bad Batch. We know at this point he's struggling with his decision to stay with the Empire and to not join up with the Bad Batch. And now on top of this, his friend in Cody has just gone AWOL, and he's learning that there's a lot of disillusioned clones within the Imperial Empire that have also gone AWOL. So I think when you start to factor this stuff in, it seems to me very likely like we're going to see Crosshair potentially do something. I don't know if that means he's going to go AWOL. I don't know if he's going to wind up killing someone. I don't know if he's going to sacrifice himself to protect the Bad Batch, but I do think something is going to happen with Crosshair. He's going to be at a crossroads, so to speak, and he's going to wind up choosing to go against the Empire. And that's even though Crosshair is very much a company man. He's been very much, at least from what we saw in season 1, he was very much about the Empire. And initially our thought was, oh, it's because of his inhibitor chip. That's why he's a company man, and that's why he's all about the Empire. But then we find out at the end of season 1 that he had his inhibitor chip removed. I think it was fairly early on in season 1, if I remember correctly. So knowing that, and knowing that he's questioning his loyalty, at least it seems like he's questioning his loyalty to the Empire, and factoring in that he probably misses the Bad Batch. Commander Cody has just gone AWOL. I think we're seeing the seeds of doubt and in Crosshair, and I think we're going to see him either go AWOL, do something to maybe protect the Bad Batch. I'm rooting for Crosshair. I'm a big Crosshair fan. Crosshair is my boy. I'm worried, though, that what may happen is that Crosshair, to redeem himself, is going to sacrifice himself to save Omega or to save one of his brothers in the Bad Batch. That's my worry, is that maybe he won't go AWOL, that he's going to be tasked with some sort of assignment to kill the Bad Batch, especially now that Rampart knows that they've survived. He may task Crosshair with trying to find them, and maybe Crosshair, to protect the Bad Batch, sacrifices himself and then redeeming himself in the process. That's very much a Star Wars thing, right? I mean, Anakin redeeming himself and killing Sidious and sacrificing himself. That's very much a Star Wars kind of trope, right? So I could see that happening where Crosshair sacrifices himself for the Bad Batch. But I will say, even though it would suck to see Crosshair die, I would be I would be happy if he's redeemed, because like I said, I really like Crosshair. I think he's a good character, and I like that we've seen him go from someone who was all about the Republic to then being all about the Empire. We initially think it's because of his inhibitor chip. We find out it's not, and now see him struggle with the weight and the gravity of his decisions and his actions. So I think Crosshair is becoming one of, if not my favorite clones that we've gotten to see so far, both in the Clone Wars, in the Bad Batch, and in the prequel. So yeah, Crosshair is definitely becoming one of, if not my favorite clone, I would say. So yeah, I think Crosshair is going to redeem himself. Maybe not rejoin the Bad Batch, but he's going to do something to redeem himself. Viz, welcome to the chat. I think Viz says, I think the Kaminoans are going to team up with Cody to make a clone rebellion to topple the Empire, something similar to what happened in Legends. I don't know about that, because at this point, the Kaminoans, as far as we know, every cloning facility on Kamino, including Topoka City, has been destroyed. Now, we do know, based on Season 1, that the Kaminoans had other cloning facilities throughout the galaxy. We know of at least one, which is on Boravio. We saw that in Season 1. We don't know if there are other cloning facilities strewn throughout the galaxy. I think we can assume that if there's one, there's at least others, because my tinfoil hat theory is that facility on Boravio was a facility commissioned by Darth Sidious to try to clone some Force-sensitive bodies for him. So it wouldn't shock me if there are other Kaminoan cloning facilities strewn throughout the galaxy, but I don't know if there would be enough for the Kaminoans to create a clone force strong enough to topple the Empire. And we know that even if there is a clone rebellion, a clone revolt, it's not going to be successful. But yeah, that's something we were talking about earlier. I think at some point we may see a potential clone revolt. Aaron Johnson, you're a little late to the party, my friend. That was the first question we answered. Maybe Aaron says maybe Cody died like Wilco. I don't think so. That was the first question I answered. I don't think Rampart killed Cody. Just seems to me like, why would the writers of the show kill Cody off screen? And what would be the reason for Rampart to want to kill Cody? At this point, before he goes AWOL, Cody's done everything that his superiors would have expected of him. So why would Rampart kill him? Doesn't make any sense. So I don't think Cody has been killed just yet. All right, let's move on to our next question. And hopefully the Bad Jedi is still around, still sticking around, because my boy the Bad Jedi asks, who founded the Jedi Order? I wanted to answer this question because the Jedi Order is something specifically from Legends. The Jedi Order has not appeared in canon at all. And I figured it'd be fun to talk about Legends. Primarily, for the most part, I do videos on Legends, but for the most part, most of my videos are diving into canon. So the live stream, I've actually dove into several different Legends questions. So I thought this would be a fun question to answer. So let's get this a little bit bigger. All right, so the Jedi first appeared in the 2012 Legends comic series Dawn of the Jedi. And I mentioned Dawn of the Jedi last week in my, was it the live stream? I can't remember if it was my Q&A last week or if it was in my breakdown with Danielle for episode 3 of the Bad Batch. Can't remember what it was, but sometime last week mentioned Dawn of the Jedi comic series, and I kind of have mixed feelings about Dawn of the Jedi. There's some really cool stuff that happens in Dawn of the Jedi. There's some really cool bits of information that we get about the Jedi Order and the galaxy when they're around. But there's some aspects of that comic I wasn't a big fan of. But with that said, before I answer the Bad Jedi's question specifically, I want to give some information about the Jedi Order, I should say, who they were. And then we'll answer the Bad Jedi's question. So in Legends, the Jedi Order was an ancient organization, an ancient order of Force sensitives that were unified by its belief and observance of the Force, specifically on the planet Tython. And Tython is in the deep core of the galaxy. So they operated on Tython, and they basically focused on maintaining a balance in the Force, so kind of similar to the Jedi. And the Jedi saw the Force as three aspects of a whole. The Ashla, which is what they referred to when speaking about the light side of the Force. Bogan, which is what they called the dark side of the Force. And the Bendu, which is what they called the Force when it was in balance. So we have heard the Ashla, Bogan, and Bendu mentioned. I'm pretty sure Ashla was mentioned in canon for the first time in Rebels in season 2. Bogan, I believe, is also mentioned for the first time in Rebels in the same episode. And then Bendu is mentioned, or is we see it in canon for the first time, I believe, also in Rebels, because there's a character in Star Wars Rebels called Bendu, which I love. I love the Bendu. He's a great character. But in Dawn of the Jedi, Ashla was what was called the light side of the Force. Bogan is the dark side of the Force. Bendu was what was called the Force was called when it was in balance, essentially. And the Jedi Order were the precursors to the Jedi. So they were what came before we see the creation of the Jedi Order, which we'll discuss shortly. And so in 36,453 BBY, so basically a very long time before the Battle of Yavin, the Thoyor, which were essentially these 8 great pyramids, which you'll see right here. This is a Thoyor right here, this pyramid. They were ships that were scattered across the galaxy, and they began to call out to inhabitants of the planets that the Thoyor were on, which included planets like Ando Prime, Kashyyyk, Manan, Ryloth, and Dathomir. And so through the Force, the Thoyor convinced Force-sensitive beings on the planets that they were on to board these starships. So they start calling out in the Force to these Force-sensitive beings. They're convincing these beings to get onto their starships. And then the pyramids basically take off. And they head out into the galaxy and depart from whichever planet they were operating on. And so the Thoyor traveled then to the deep core planet of Tython, where a 9th and far larger Thoyor actually awaited them. So there was a total of 9 Thoyors, one of which was on Tython, 8 others that were scattered throughout the galaxy. And once the 8 other Thoyor arrived on Tython, this event became known as the Thoyor arrival. So the 8 Thoyor, they gather around the 9th and larger Thoyor, and then they eventually scatter across Tython, and they began depositing their passengers within their ships at their final destination, wherever it was that they settled on the planet of Tython. The Force-sensitive pilgrims who would aboard these starships would collectively become known as I don't know if it's pronounced Tythans or Tythons. It's basically spelled just like Tython, except with an A instead of an O. I typically call them Tythans. I have seen some people refer to them as Tythons. So Tythans, Tythons, same sort of thing. But they essentially immediately realized that Tython was uniquely strong in the Force. So Tython is a planet very strong in the Force. Kind of. I don't want to say it's specifically a nexus of the Force, but it's very much similar to like a nexus in the Force. And so they realized that they had been brought to Tython in order to study the Force and to learn to control and master the abilities that it was granted to them. So basically, these Force sensitives strewn throughout the galaxy, these pyramid starships start calling to them. They hop on these starships. Starships then take them to Tython, where there's already a larger starship waiting for them. Then they get placed in different locations throughout Tython. And so now we're starting to see the early birth of the Jedi Orders. It hasn't been created just yet. But basically, on Tython, balance in the Force was constantly in flux. The balance was very much the Force was very much tumultuous on Tython. So they referred to the light side as Ashla, dark side as Bogan. And they named them after Tython's two moons, the bright satellite, which was called Ashla, and the dark moon, which was called Bogan. So that's how they came up with the names for the dark side and the light side of the Force. So their bright moon was called Ashla, dark moon was called Bogan. So now to answer the Bad Jedi's question, who specifically created the Jedi Order, there wasn't one specific person that is credited with creating the Jedi Order. Instead, what we know is that the Thoyor pilgrims, after arriving on Tython, formed the Jedi Order, and they took their name from the language of the Dai Bendu monks of the Talid species, combining the words Je, meaning mystic, and Dai, meaning center. So that's how they came up with the name Jedi, combining two Dai Bendu words. So just like the Jedi Order basically, they felt that balance in the Force was essential. So the Force being in balance was very important to the Jedi Order. And part of this is because of the fact that their survival on Tython, it hampered on whether or not the balance was in Force. So when there was balance between Ashla and Bogan, that balance prevented the chaos and destruction that came with imbalance on Tython. So when the Force was out of balance, you would get scenarios like this here, where these creatures would start attacking the pilgrims or the Jedi Order. Crazy stuff would start happening. There would be force storms if the Force was out of balance. So for the Jedi Order's actual survival, it was dependent upon balance in the Force between Ashla and Bogan, because when the balance was out of whack, bad things started to happen to the Jedi Order. So for them, balance in the Force was it was a pinnacle part of their order, on making sure that there was balance between Ashla and Bogan. And then over the next 1,000 years or so, the Jedi wound up building various temples, and then cities and centers were basically started popping up around those temples. And they began teaching and learning how to heal, how to use the Force. They began studying different aspects of the Force. So basically, we're seeing the early remnants of what will eventually become the Jedi Order. And all of these temples that they built, the cities, the centers that were created, were all built around those 9 Thoyor on Tython. So over 1,000 years after the Thoyor arrival, a second migration winds up happening. Let's make this bigger. And that occurred when all Tythans who were not Force sensitive were made to leave the planet, even if it broke up families, and the non-Force sensitives settled first on Ashla and Bogan before spreading out to the outer worlds within the Tython system. So essentially, the people on Tython started having kids. Some of those kids wound up being non-Force sensitive, and those non-Force sensitives were eventually forced off of Tython. For about 10,000 years, the Jedi Order saw peace. So when the Thoyor pilgrims first arrived on Tython, there's about a 10,000 year period of them operating and having peace on Tython. But then in 25,805 BBY, the Despot War broke out, which is, this is a scene from that war. And the Jedi Order decided to intervene in that conflict. So now we're starting to see that peace that the Jedi Order saw for a very, very, very long period of time. It's starting to fracture and falter. Then in 25,783 BBY, or excuse me, 79, so 25,793 BBY, the forces of the Recon Infinite Empire invaded Tython. And we see this happen in, again, the Dawn of the Jedi comic series. So the Recons, they invade Tython, and that invasion resulted in the Jedi Order defeating the Recon Infinity Empire, and the Order beginning to construct Force Sabers, which you see right here. This is a Force Saber. Differs from a lightsaber. They were all, Force Sabers were the precursor of lightsabers. So essentially, Force Sabers were a Recon invention in which powerful dark side energy was channeled through laboratory-grown kyber crystals, or laboratory-grown crystals, I should say, in glowing energy blades, able to be ignited much like a lightsaber. So the big difference with a lightsaber and a Force Saber is essentially, to utilize a Force Saber, the wielder would have to basically pump a large amount of dark side power into the saber for it to be able to operate, because the Recons used, they were force sensitive and they were force users, but they specifically used the dark side of the force. So now fast forward to 25,783 BBY, so about 10 years after the Recons have invaded Tython. So now 10 years later, the Jedi Order splintered into two factions, essentially, within the Order. We saw two factions within the Jedi Order begin to emerge. One that sought power through the Bogan, so folks that wanted to harness the power of the dark side, and others that sought power through the light side of the Force, who wanted to basically help those that were disenfranchised, those that were powerless. And through that, we then get to see these lightsiders, those that follow Ashla, create the Jedi Order. So this was led by Jedi Masters Rajavari, Garin Jard, Kalabrin, and Ters Senda, to create a new group which became known as the Jedi Order. And I'm not 100% sure if the first time this is mentioned is in Star Wars: The Old Republic. I just remember learning about this in Star Wars: The Old Republic when I was playing it, and I thought it was so cool. But yeah, so that's how we see the Jedi Order wind up being created, because the faction that splintered from the Jedi Order that wanted to use the dark side of the Force, this led to what was known as the Force Wars. And we see this play out in the Dawn of the Jedi comic series. And that comic, it's cool. I would definitely say if what I'm talking about, if you have not read this comic before, you weren't aware about the Jedi Order, some of the stuff that I'm mentioning here, definitely give Dawn of the Jedi a chance then, because you might like it. There's definitely some cool things that happen in that comic series. There are a couple of things though that I wasn't the biggest fan of. Specifically, and I'm not going to reveal too much, there's like a love story that takes place in the comic, which I thought how it was written was very derivative, very trite, so I didn't really like that. How some of the characters are depicted, some of their actions, their motivations just didn't make sense to me. So some of the stuff that we see in Dawn of the Jedi, I was like, this comic is kind of not the best, but it does have some cool moments. I do like that it gives us some really cool information, because again, this story is playing out tens of thousands of years before the events of A New Hope and before the Battle of Yavin. So I do like that. And I would love if we start to see Lucasfilm dive into, thousands and thousands and thousands of years prior to the events of A New Hope. I would like that to be something that Lucasfilm delves into with canon. But, if you're into learning about, galactic history, galactic lore, the Jedi, then this is definitely a comic series that I would recommend. Because I think you might find some cool stuff in there. And it's a very quick read. It's basically separated into two segments, so to speak, and I think they're both like 5 issues long. It's a very quick comic read, so it's definitely worth checking out. All right, so Kayleen asked, do you think we'll ever get a Thrawn in an animated show? Well, we did. We saw Thrawn in Rebels. Yeah, Rob just mentions, Thrawn, does he first appear in season 2 or is it season 3? Season 3. I think it's in the beginning of season 3 he first premieres. And I love Thrawn's inclusion in season 3 of Rebels. One of the things that bugs me sometimes with Thrawn and how he's been depicted in canon is how he's depicted in Rebels versus how he's depicted in the Thrawn books. They differ. In the Thrawn books, he's not as maniacal and sinister as he's depicted in the in Rebels. But I still really like Thrawn, and I really like his inclusion in Rebels. So yeah, Caleb, he's been included in Star Wars Rebels, and if you haven't watched Rebels before, highly recommend it. It's dope. It's on Disney Plus. It's got some excellent moments, so I would definitely suggest it for you, especially if you're a fan of the Clone Wars and the Bad Batch. Dave Filoni had a big hand in Rebels, so I think you would like it if you haven't watched it. All right, so let's move and groove to our last question. So Brian Johnson asks, is it true Kathleen Kennedy, her staff, and writers are being let go? I really thought about not choosing this question to address. And I initially was like, I'm not even going to entertain this question. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? I do want to address this. I do want to talk about this because there's too many shit posters on YouTube and on the internet that will gladly talk about their ire and their disdain for Kathleen Kennedy, that I want to talk about it. So I want to give my response to, is it true Kathleen Kennedy is getting fired? I mean, how many years now is this that Kathleen Kennedy is supposed to be getting fired? What is this, like 5 years running that she's supposedly getting fired? It kind of blows my mind that there are people out there that still like beat this drum, and that there are people that will just like blindly believe it when it's been, she's supposed to be supposedly getting fired for like the last 5 years and still has not gotten fired. This is why I wanted to talk about this question, because there's just too much misinformation. There's too many people on YouTube and again on the internet that are just looking to get people revved up, are looking, they're posting clickbait stuff, just looking to get people to watch their videos, looking to get people to open up their posts on whatever website they're posting this stuff on. And they're essentially trolls, man, because there is nothing that I've seen that has any validity and any modicum of truth in Kathleen Kennedy being fired, or there being any conversations of her getting fired. And there have not been in all these years that people claim she's been on the outs at Lucasfilm, has one foot out the door. I have never seen any valid source or outlet actually say that that's the case. It's only been from shit posters pulling stuff out of their ass, essentially saying that she's getting fired. And the fact that people buy that still just like blows my mind. I don't understand how people could just be like, yeah, I read however many years ago that Kathleen Kennedy was supposed to be getting fired, and the same shit poster is still saying this and hasn't been fired. Oh, I guess that's true. Like, how could you continually fall for that? It's very dumbfounding to me. But what I find so ridiculous about those fire Kathleen Kennedy people is that they want to dunk on her for whatever it is that they don't like about Star Wars, whether it's the sequels, whether it's some of the shows that we've gotten, whether it's the fact that, you know, Lucasfilm hasn't brought back whatever Legends character or whatever story, whatever it is that they're trying to dump on Kathleen Kennedy about, right? They'll the moment they have an opportunity to dump on Kathleen Kennedy, they will. But with stuff that fans universally love, that Kathleen Kennedy absolutely had a hand in, don't hear a goddamn peep, right? Mandalorian, Kathleen Kennedy had a big role in that. Andor, Rogue One, Season 7 of the Clone Wars, The Bad Batch, the list goes on, right? And where are those people to fire the Kathleen Kennedy people when that sort of stuff happens? You don't hear them say a damn thing. And that's one of the big things that pisses me off about that sort of stuff, is just that, you know, picking and choosing when you want to say Kathleen Kennedy needs to be fired. Makes me so mad, and it bums me out. It really does. It bums me out that there are so many negative people on YouTube and on social media that constantly want to just shit on Star Wars, want to dump on Star Wars and Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy for whatever reasons. You know, I read a ton of canon. I have read a ton of Legends. And from polls that I've put up on my YouTube channel, from my comments, what I can tell you guys, the vast majority of you are not reading comics. The vast majority of you are not reading books. The vast majority of you may not have read Legend stuff. So the information that you're getting from YouTubers that are all about the Kathleen Kennedy trade, they like to spin things to their however they want that narrative to go, because there's a lot of excellent canon stuff. Even if you may not like the sequels or some of the shows, the comics and the books, some of the comics and books that we've gotten in canon blow Legends stuff away. I will say Legends has done a way better job of diving into the Sith. I will say that Legends has dove more into the past than canon has. But as far as like the Jedi and a lot of other stuff, canon, like in my opinion, blows Legends out of the water. And again, this is from someone that has read a bunch of Legends and has read a bunch of canon stuff. But it just bums me out that there's still so much negativity, so much toxicity in the fandom, that people can't just enjoy Star Wars. You know, there was I can't remember the question. It was like one of the first or second Q&As I did. I've been really enjoying Cyberpunk. I was late to the Cyberpunk 2077 train. I started getting into that game because of my brother and the Edge Runners show. And I have literally been holding off finishing that game because I'm like, yo, once I finish the storyline, the game's done. And there is going to be a new expansion that's coming out, but it's still a little bit of ways away. And I don't want to finish that game because once I finish, that is it. All we have is the game, Edge Runner series, the expansion that comes out soon, and then there's going to be a book that's dropping, and there's some comics, and that's it. As Star Wars fans, we are so spoiled. There's books that are released like every freaking month. There are multiple comics that come out every freaking month. We get countless Star Wars shows. We're going to start getting movies again soon. We are so spoiled. And it just bums me out that people want to hang on to the negativity and the toxicity and constantly lean into, hey, fire Kathleen Kennedy. She's what's wrong with Lucasfilm. Because while I don't think every single person that thinks Kathleen Kennedy should be fired feels this way, I do think a lot of the sentiment towards, and the ire towards Kathleen Kennedy, I think it's rooted in misogyny. I really do. Because I think if Dave Filoni was the head of Lucasfilm, I don't think you would hear people lose their minds the way they do with Kathleen Kennedy. I really don't. You know, so what I would say to you all, if you follow people that are all about the fire Kathleen Kennedy, start to broaden your horizons. check out other people, watch YouTube videos from Star Wars Explained, from new rock stars, go to Star Wars Newsnet, read up stuff on, I believe they have a YouTube channel as well, Star Wars Newsnet. Listen to podcasts like the Ringerverse podcasts. All of them will critique Star Wars, but they do it in a very non-toxic way. And that to me is A-okay. You'll hear me talk about critique Star Wars stuff or say that there's things I don't like about Star Wars, but I'm not going to lose my mind or be super toxic or negative about it. So I would say if you are someone that is solely following people that are YouTubers or whatever person that is all about the fire Kathleen Kennedy train, start broadening your horizons, man, because there are some other really great content creators that are going to give you some excellent information about Star Wars, that are going to give you some different insight and a different point of view on Star Wars. And at this point, Kathleen Kennedy's not going anywhere, guys. She has made Lucasfilm a ton of money. Granted, the sequels were not handled the best, but Star Wars is making a ton of money for Disney. Lucasfilm is making a ton of money for Disney. So Kathleen Kennedy is probably not going anywhere. My thought would be the only way we're going to see Kathleen Kennedy not be the head of Lucasfilm is if she leaves or she decides to retire. That's pretty much it. But again, going back to what I mentioned, you guys get to choose how you consume Star Wars, right? And the people that you follow. So I would say if you're following people that are only talking about Kathleen Kennedy in a negative way, I would recommend starting to broaden your horizons on the people that you're getting your information from and you're watching, because, you know, with me and with my channel, my whole thing was I work a full-time job. I only have so much time during the week that I could talk about Star Wars. Why the hell would I waste my time going apeshit about something that I don't like in Star Wars? Yeah, I'll talk about maybe if there's things I don't like about Star Wars, but I only got so much time each week that I could work on videos, guys. I want to talk about the things that I like. I want to talk about the things that I like that I know you guys like. I'm not here to talk about the negative things with Star Wars or the stuff I don't like, because I don't have the time. And even if I did, guys, life is too short. I want to be positive. I want to talk about the things that I like that make me happy. Luckily for me, a lot of what we've gotten in Star Wars since Lucasfilm was acquired by Disney, I've liked. So that's why you will not see me talking about negative stuff. I've gone away from doing videos on Star Wars news because I felt like a lot of it led to negativity, especially in the comments. I try to like weed out comments that are negative or really, really, really negative. It's hard because I only have so much time throughout the week, and some of my videos get so many comments. But my thing, guys, be cool. Don't be an ass. Enjoy Star Wars. Don't bitch and moan. There's a lot of really good things to be happy about with Star Wars. And even if you're someone that is, I like Legends more, hey, that's cool. You can absolutely like Legends more. And that's your prerogative, but you don't have to be a jerk. And I feel like more often than not, the people that are like, yo, fire Kathleen Kennedy, they're usually the jerks. They're usually the bullies and the people being asses in comments. So don't be one of those people. Enjoy Star Wars. Have fun. Let's be positive. Let's be a community of Star Wars fans, because we all just love Star Wars and we just want to enjoy this amazing galaxy. So sorry to go on a tirade. As I mentioned, I grappled with whether or not to answer that question. Initially, I scoffed that question. I was like, I'm not going to answer this. Stupid. Then I was talking about it with Danielle, and I was just like, you know what? Yeah, I do want to talk about it, because there are so many YouTubers out there that want to shit on Kathleen Kennedy. And I'm going to be one of those YouTubers that's not going to shit on Kathleen Kennedy, even if I'm not 100% on board with every single decision that Lucasfilm has made since they were acquired by Disney. I still think there's been a lot of good that we've gotten from Star Wars. And again, I'm just going to use Cyberpunk as an analogy. Bro, I got one video game and an expansion pack, 2 or 3 comics, and a book. That's it. That's all I get. to be able to dive into that universe. And Star Wars, we have a plethora of movies, shows now, comics and books. And that's not even including Legends. So let's not be spoiled. Let's not be jerks. Just enjoy Star Wars. All right. So sorry to leave it on a bitter note. But with that said, guys, these were a excellent series of questions. I had a lot of fun breaking these questions down and diving into them. There were several questions that I couldn't get to for this week. So if you did not see your question answered, keep a lookout, because that could be a question that I might answer next week or in the weeks coming up for our Q&A. If you have not, you jabroni, now is a great time to like this comment. If you agree with anything that I said, let me know in the comments. If you disagree with what I said, let me know in the comments. But again, let's be friendly if you do disagree with me. On Wednesday, Danny Girl and I, as the season of the Bad Batch continues, we'll be breaking down and diving into the episodes after, usually around the same time, about 7:30, 8 o'clock maybe. So keep a lookout for that. I'm depending upon my work week. The Q&A may shift from like a Monday. It might be on a Tuesday. I think I'm going to try to keep it on Monday, or now I think Fridays. It might be Monday or Friday, because I want to try to keep a day in between the Bad Batch breakdowns. So probably Mondays and Fridays are going to be the 2 days. I'm going to try to keep it on Mondays, but we'll see. With work and life, sometimes it could be a little bit of a challenge. Keep a lookout for posts to get released weekly. Those I'm releasing on the reg. So definitely keep a lookout for that. And then if you want to ask any questions for me to answer in future Q&As, I release in the community section of the YouTube page, I release my weekly, I'll probably do like 2 or 3 question requests. I post my lovely picture of my homeboy Sidious wearing glasses. So that's where you guys can drop your questions if you'd like me to answer them in a future Q&A. So with that said, we're closing in on 9 o'clock. That's my time to jump into Halo. I've been like on a roll with Halo lately. I've been rocking and rolling. I'm now Diamond 1. Diamond 1 in Halo ranked. So I've been killing it lately. So hopefully I won't be getting my ass kicked. Hopefully I'll be the one doing some ass kicking. But it's about that time for me to get my gaming on. So with that said, my friends, if you haven't subscribed to Star Wars Transmissions, now's your chance. Don't know what the hell you're doing, subscribe to the channel, support us. It's always super appreciated. We just hit 30,000 subscribers, which is like mind-blowing to me. I can't believe we hit 30,000. But I'm going to go play some Halo. You guys have an excellent night. As always, may the Force be with you, and stay nerdy.